put just as much emphasis on training your leaders to influence well externally as you are developing them to influence well internally. And don't wait until it's too late. Start to figure out how you can take steps towards that now.
All right. Hey, welcome back to the GO4CEO channel. Strong products and teams don't guarantee scale. Credible external leadership does. And Shayna is here to tell us why. Welcome to the GO4CEO channel. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me, John.
Awesome, awesome. Well, look, super excited to have you on. Always feeling kind of this pull right towards leadership and what we're all talking about, and feeling like, hey, who has that kind of secret sauce? Last night, I was actually with a friend till about 11 o'clock at night. He works for a pretty large pharmaceutical corporation that does business all around the world. He's traveling out to Brazil today. And it was interesting to kind of hear him talk about how he's noticed, and he's from Mexico, went to Mexico City, higher education, all that good stuff. And he's noticed how they put people in boxes, right? Strong performers maybe fit in around, 30% of it he was talking about. Then there's like this 20% that executives have identified for next two levels up. And then there's, 20% that they're like, yeah, we'll just keep those people there. Right? Unfortunately, in that sense, even if those people don't believe that they should just be kept there. But anyway, would love to talk to you about kind of where your background came from, what have you been doing, and then what helped you launch this current business that you're in.
Absolutely. So I've been an entrepreneur for over 20 years. I like to say I've spun the block a time or two. And everything that I have done in entrepreneurship has been pertaining to leadership in some form or fashion, whether it was our presence, our communication, how I think at the very beginning I was working on like how do you become more productive and efficient, just because it was like I was tired of working with entrepreneurs and I was trying to figure out how to take my expertise and make it fit for larger companies, because I was tired of entrepreneurs saying I'd love to work with you but I just can't afford to pay you.
Mm.
So I think at the beginning I was just doing like general disc, assessment related type of training or whatever, and then over the years it really has segued into how do we influence well. And you talked about like what companies are doing and what companies are not doing. And the world has changed. And the companies that are actually going to win with all of the changes that are going on are going to be the ones that recognize it's not just about how well your teams perform internally and how well the product or services that you sell, but it's actually going to be those leaders that know how to influence well externally, because that's where a lot of the opinion and reputation, et cetera, is being formed.
Hmm. So when you mean externally, is that more based on the brand that they're representing, or also their own kind of influence, those types of areas?
So what I mean is that, well, let me just set the context a little bit of what I
Mhm.
mean when I say that the world has changed. So right now, companies are receiving three external signals. Doesn't matter what the size of the company is, the type of company, the industry. Everyone's in a war over talent. The trust gaps are widening, and we've all been disrupted by technology. And
Mhm.
when you think specifically about the trust, especially in the tech disruption, companies are judging you based on how well your leaders are demonstrating credibility and trust and authority. They're not just looking at, oh, what does your website say? And does your product solve a good problem? Because nowadays everyone's product is pretty good, and everyone's product is, everybody can say they're quick and they're fast and they're keeping up with, with AI, etc. However, it's becoming increasingly normal for roles that were never traditionally forward facing to have to engage outside of the company. What do I mean by that? They're having to have conversations with investors. They're having to be interviewed by the media. They're on industry panels. They're having to start to have conversations with customers. And all teams have not been trained how to do that. They've been taught how to do their jobs well. They've been taught how to lead their internal teams and kind of how to influence internally, but they've never really been trained on how do you influence well externally. And so if you have a leader that is used to being heads down working on the product, they're used to being heads down working on developing their teams internally, and they now have to engage externally in any of those public arenas, if you will, like I just said, that's where trust is going to continue to erode because they're like, wait a minute, this dude or this gal is really, I can tell they're just only regurgitating the bullet points that the comms or marketing people told them to memorize, or the only thing they said was what I probably could have found on the website. But I'm not really feeling like, well, who are you as a person? Do you not have like any opinion as to like where the industry is, where it's going? And so you can see how if there's already a trust gap and there's already this level of disruption and we're already trying to figure out what company we want to go work for, if your leaders have not been developed to be able to represent your brand with trust and credibility when they're engaging externally, then it doesn't matter how great they are inside. It doesn't matter how great your product is. They're wondering whether or not this is a company that they want to follow, whether or not this is a company they want to buy from, invest in, or come work for.
Hmm. It's interesting. It made me think. I recently made a change. I'm a commercial banker day to day, and I made a change in a bank. And it's interesting. My current boss, we built the relationship through a few interviews and went out to lunch and all those types. And I was referred in, so they were recruiting hard for the position here. And it made me think of when you're describing that, I didn't see a presence, outside of the bank of where he leads. And it's interesting to hear because as a smaller bank that I went to, it's very much you have to have a presence in the community or something like that. But, I came from having been doing a podcast and writing a book and so that was probably an attraction for them to bring me into the organization. So it's really interesting to kind of hear that perspective and seeing, I interviewed a gentleman that owns a company called Interview Valet, and he says to me in the podcast, what's that?
It's Tom.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So he says, hey, it's funny, CEOs and founders of companies aren't the only ones we're actually booking. We're booking the HR person, we're booking the operations person, we're booking because they can tell a different story on a different genre of podcast, and then it all comes back to relate to that company and the integrity and all that stuff. So really cool stuff. Is this also too why Instagram and all these feeds? I keep on hearing about communication, your communication. Is that part of it or no?
Probably so, but I would like to think most people are not thinking on the level that you and I are talking about. But I want to
Hmm.
go back to what you said about being interviewed by the individual. It's not even so much about like, does he have a presence in the community? When I say presence, I mean, how are you actually showing up as the leader, right? Because you probably couldn't have cared less whether or not he was involved in the local Boys and Girls Club and, had an Instagram or whatever. But
Okay.
if you were having a conversation with that person that was interviewing you, and everything you asked them, the only thing that they could tell you was just about the job description, you'd be thinking, who are these bozos that they have hired that have worked here? I don't necessarily think I want to be part of this team. I don't necessarily think I like the culture here. I don't think I necessarily can even get a feel for where they are and where they're going because he sounded like a corporate branded parrot because the only thing he could talk about is what you probably could have found in what it is, whatever it was that you had access to
Mm.
before you filled out the application. And what I'm referring to here, John, I call it leadership identity. Most leaders have never really thought about what is my unique point of view about either the industry that I'm in or the product or service that we sell, which is why they just are only able to regurgitate what the company stands for, what the company's values are, what the features and benefits of either the job is or what it is that they're selling, because they've never stepped back to think about, okay, I'm in the banking industry. What do I feel about where the banking industry is right now and how we as leaders, especially senior leaders in the banking industry, what it is that we're going to have to embrace, understand, do differently maybe in order to keep up with what the industry commands. If you start to hear them talking about things like that, it makes you even more confident about either banking with them, or it makes you even more confident about coming to work with them because they have actually shown up and given you some level of you have a peek inside of who the leaders are. Because think back in the IBM days, John, most people, if you didn't have a reason to know, you didn't know who led that company. Then
Mm.
Steve Jobs came in and it was kind of like the CEO was the brand. But now, when you look at companies like NVIDIA and other companies that are out there, the entire core leadership team is pretty on par with being able to demonstrate what it is that we're talking about now versus just this bland robotic. Okay, I knew that before I got here. Like, what are you telling me that I couldn't have researched on my own? And it makes a decision in who's going to come work for you, who's going to buy from you. If you're a tech company and you've received funding, it's going to help your investor confidence going to go up because they're like, oh, this leadership team actually gets it. Because what do you do when there's a level playing field when everybody has a strong product?
Mm. Well, you're bringing up a lot of great thoughts, right, and topics of how we can go deeper. Um, when you think about the ability to have your C-suite out there in the marketplace, sharing the story, but then, like you said, authentically becoming kind of more human, right,
Mhm.
in a way, and sharing that aspect of it and attracting the talent. And you're right. I mean, I work in kind of the emerging middle market side where 5 to 150 million dollar companies, top line revenue, and it's interesting to see they're all saying the same thing, right? We can't attract the right people, or we're doing it on this, that. So, you've developed this new way of thinking, right? And I'm sure, obviously, you were mentored and stuff like that. So, tell us a little bit about, I guess, the at what point did you say to yourself, okay, this is a topic I feel super strongly and convicted about, and I want to go create, an organization, a business out of it.
Absolutely. So you remember I said I've always done something in leadership development, communication in some
Mm-hmm.
form or another, like forever, right?
Mm-hmm.
I may not look it, but I'm almost 50. So I was doing something like that, like kind of forever. And what ended up happening is that it's all been, gosh, it's been almost 4 years ago now. That's wild. In 2022, I lost my dad, my grandmother, and my
Mm-hmm.
boyfriend back to back in 3 months.
Wow.
And normally, the type A fireball girl that you're looking at right now would just push through. Like most things that happen, I just push through, heads down. It is what it is. Jesus was down for 3 days and then he got up. That's about the number of days I'm going to give myself, right? And so, but I knew that this time it wasn't going to be good for me or anyone else if I pushed through that, especially because like my dad raised me. Like it wasn't just like, oh, I'm sad, whatever.
Mm.
So what I ended up doing is I said, this was around July. I said, I'm going to take the rest of the year off because I feel like I need that. And in the beginning of the year, which would have been 2023, I'll figure out if I want to get a job or if I want to go back into business for myself. And so, very long story short, I had sold a house that I owned, and that was going to give me enough money to live until March. So by January, I was going to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. Well, in January, I got contacted by the lawyer of this Silicon Valley unicorn billionaire guy. I'm still under NDA, even though I haven't been there forever, so I can't say his name. And they said he's coming back out of retirement to start something new, and we're looking for someone that can help us out with our marketing and some of the other things that I'd had experience in. And they were like, we know we're starting way too soon, right? So they bring me in. And this company, it was a fintech company, and they were building a product for Wall Street institutions.
Mm.
When they got closer and closer to being ready for launch, the founder said to the CTO and the VP of engineering, you're going to have to start having conversations with these Wall Street executives about how what we're building is going to revolutionize their industry and how they're
Mm.
going to be faster and better than BlackRock and all of their other competition because that's what everyone wants to do is hang their shingle on I'm faster and better than the people that are considered our competition. Well, for those of you that may not be watching the video, the wall behind me is white. The two individuals were from the Middle East and they were darker than I am, and they turned the color of the wall behind me. Why?
Mm.
Because there's a competency gap oftentimes when you're in a role that does not require you to engage externally. So while they were great at building the product, while they were great at leading their internal teams, they did not have the level of competency that it was going to take to be able to talk to the investors about how what they were doing was going to change the industry. And they doggone sure did not have the competency to talk to these Wall Street executives in a language that they were going to understand of how
Mm,
what they were building was going to change the industry that they were in. So when I was no longer with that company, it gave, number one, I knew that I wanted to go back into business for myself and not work for someone else. I'm unemployable. But it also said to me, I want to double down on technical leaders. So now companies bring me in when their leadership team is increasingly visible to investors, media, and customers. All types of companies come to me and hire me when they hear me on things like this. But in terms of the companies that I scout or I hunt, I focus primarily on STEM because the technical leaders are the one that the competency gap usually seems to be the widest. Because that's
mm.
just not what they're trained to do. They're trained to build and scale and ship and lead inside. They're not trained to influence well outside. And right now, because of all of the outside pressures that we explained at the beginning of the show, it's a requirement of the job in almost every single startup.
Hmm. It's interesting, right? So, all right. Well, look, I think the gamut of everything that you're sharing is pretty wide in the sense of, hey, this is an initiative that is impacting every business, right? But like you said, those people also influence and attract people that are talented to come into that organization. So I love that. I love that component of it because, you know, I always go back to simplicity, right, of communication. And I learned a long time ago, it's called FORM, family, occupation, recreation, and money, right?
Yeah.
And that's what you talk to when you're in a networking event, as an example. But as you said, talking to an investor group or talking to the public or talking to, associations and being out there is a little bit of a tweak. So, what are you using as, I guess, your platforms of, learning those spaces, and what's the client journey for them to come in and work with you?
Yeah. So I have a three-pronged approach. I call it executive influence. I hate the word executive presence. I think it needs a reframe. For years, executive presence has just talked about like your poise and your clothes and how you show up in the room. And I think
Mm,
it's more about now about how we're being perceived by the outside world, which is what we've been talking about for the last 20 minutes. But I have a three-pronged approach to that. And this is what the steps that I take anyone through if they're working with me. Number one is leadership identity. And we've talked about that because oftentimes the companies are like, oh, they need media training, they need communication training. I'm like, they do. But if we don't do some foundational work first, it doesn't matter how camera and mic ready I get them, it's still not going to land. And they're still going to just sound like they were regurgitating the bullet points that your comms guy and marketing team has probably already asked them to memorize. So the leadership identity is what I mentioned earlier, where I'm helping them understand like what is your narrative as a leader? What is your unique point of view about either the company that you work for or the industry that you're in? That's step number one. That's the foundational work that every leader has to ask themselves. I would say if you're a leader inside of a company or you're leading other leaders inside of a company, I would encourage you to ask yourself or ask your team, what is your unique point of view, either about the industry that you're in or the product that we sell? And if they can't succinctly answer that in 30 seconds or less, they've given zero thought to the narrative that they're
mm,
creating. Then and only then can we get into the leadership branding, which is the presence of how they look and how they show up and what do their visuals look like. Does your CTO's um, headshot on their LinkedIn look like it was taken at a backyard barbecue, or do they actually look like the brilliant leader that they are? And then we get to the last piece that everybody wants to skip to, which is the leadership messaging. That's where we focus on making sure that they're actually clearly communicating their values in a way that can be understood by the outside world and demonstrate trust and authority.
mm. So that journey of someone coming through the process that you bring them through, is it something that you've established now more of kind of a retainer, or what type of scenario do you
Yeah, so
engage
there's
with
a
the
couple of
companies
different
in?
things. I do something that's called the influence intensive several times a year, where companies
Hmm.
send their leaders to me for 2 days. We
Hmm.
work on all the things that I just talked about. I even give them new photos because most of them are not really representing themselves visually
Hmm.
in the
Hmm.
way that really matches the branding, of the company and the brilliance that they have. And they end up leaving with a 90-day plan of how they can continue to implement that once they get back into their company. And they even get a nice little certificate because, people like dopamine hits. So one of the ways that that companies work with me is they send their leaders to my 2-day intensive. I offer that about 3 times a year. Other times they're like, no, we just want to bring you in to work directly with our leaders on the three things that you just mentioned. And I pretty much take them through the same three-pronged approach. It's just that it's like now I'm bringing the intensive to them instead of them sending their leaders to the intensive to be in the mix with other leaders. And there's obviously times that, people want something that is like this is the one thing that we have coming up that we know we need to work on. How can you help us shape that and make sure that their messaging matches the company messaging, so sometimes there's even more layers where we go more deep. But oftentimes, once the companies really understand and once the leaders really understand, I call it my IBM, that leadership identity, branding, and messaging, they usually can then go back and translate it into all of the different things that they're doing because of the work that we've done together.
Hmm. And the 2-day intensives, are you bringing in other vendors? Like, you said they walk away with some incredible headshots. So it
Yeah,
could be a photographer, but then do you prep them on the clothing?
I
Do they have
do.
to go shopping a day before, right?
Well, what I do is I send them a questionnaire prior to them getting there or prior to me going in to ask them certain things to get them thinking about how they've been dressing and looking and what their photos and stuff look like. And then I give them suggestions of what it is that they may want to consider and give them some images because I'm not asking you to become somebody different. I'm not saying if you normally would wear a plaid button down that I'm going to ask you to now start wearing a white V-neck shirt and a leather jacket. We're not trying to change who we are. We're just trying to make sure that the presence that people actually see matches the brilliance that you have and the brilliance that your company, is building. There can't be a mismatch. Now, the funny thing is that most of the tech companies that I work with, their standard uniform is a black t-shirt and track pants anyway, which is fine. But, so I bring in a photographer that takes the pictures. I give them a little bit of guidance of what they might want to bring with them. And some people are like, listen, dude, I wear this black t-shirt and I want it to be this black t-shirt, but it's like, okay, well, can we at least get some more professional, looking photos than the selfie that I can tell you cropped other people out of and that's what you're putting on your bio and the next industry panel that you're going to be speaking at, they pull up the screen and that's the image on there is you. It's like, were you at a wedding or like what are these people doing in the background? And somebody's shoulder is right next to yours in the picture. But outside of that, it's just me. Number one,
Okay.
we only have 2 days. I don't have time to be bringing in a whole bunch of different people. And there's usually between 20 and 30, leaders that are there. So I have the photographer that is there that's helping them with their assets. But they also lead with making sure that their LinkedIn bios read not like a resume and actually the leadership identity that they have developed. So they leave with a full suite of assets, but it's primarily just me for now. Now I'm considering extending it to more days, but the more days you ask somebody to be out of the office, the more objections they have. So I'm trying
Hmm.
to keep it tight and right and figure out, there might be ways that they may need some additional support for carryover once the 2 days is over. But let's get them in, hit it, quit it. There's no fluff. I don't care if you're motivated and inspired. I want you to be transformed. I hope you were motivated and inspired when you get there. So there's no fluff. There's no songs. There's no dancing after the break. None of that frou-frou crap. I get you in, I get you out, and when you leave, you're going to be a more visible and credible leader because there was actually a research study that said that companies whose visible leaders are more credible, they're like 58% more likely to attract top talent and customers, and they're 72% more likely to keep them. And then there was another study that said the average CEO has considered either buying a service or switching service providers when the person that they're talking to is someone that they actually not just like because they thought they were a cool dude, but the authority and the credibility and everything translated so much so that they're like, I can't not do business with this company because if these are the type of people that are working there, I don't even have to worry about the next bright shiny object that the next company comes out with. This is where it is that I know I want to be. And obviously that applies when people are deciding where they're going to work.
Hmm. So that last statement made me think of who do you work with, from are you more enterprise? Are you more mid-market? Where are you
Yeah.
working with? What area of business are
Usually,
you in?
so in the 20 years that I have been doing what you would call corporate consulting, the only time I've ever had a large company that has hired me is when they've heard me speak somewhere or I've been referred. Because the larger
Mhm.
the organization, the more they think they already have it figured out and
Mhm.
they don't need anybody from the outside. It's 100% not true, but it's also 100% what they think. And I like to preach to the converted and not convince anyone of anything. So my sweet spot is that mid-sized company or that tech startup that is usually at around Series B of funding. Why is that? Because pre-seed and Series A, they're usually so focused on the product and their go-to-market strategy that they're not necessarily thinking about the development of their leaders or what the leaders are going to have to say to the outside world. Now, I wish they would bring me in earlier, but trying to convince them to focus on some of those other things when they're head down on the product is just a battle that I'm not usually, going to fight. So oftentimes I'm either working with that Series B or higher STEM startup, or I'm working with a mid-sized company that usually has, 100 to 500 employees.
Okay. And you've mentioned comms and marketing. Do those departments influence what you do based on what they're internally looking at? Because
Absolutely.
I would say there's probably a little bit of, tug and pull, right, between those two areas of the business and what you're bringing in as a consultant.
Correct. What I'm teaching technology can't replicate, bullet points can't replicate, marketing campaigns cannot replicate. So if your company has a PR person, they have a comms person, they have a marketing person, I'm not saying that none of that stuff is valid. But what I'm saying is that people trust people. They don't trust marketing campaigns. They don't trust repeatable bullet points that people can tell they were memorized. That we need real humans that are talking and engaging like real humans. So with the work that we're doing, we're actually looking at what has the marketing team put together and what has the comms team put together. And now how do we take the work that you're doing with me to support and put a nice little bow around all of it so that it's like, oh, you've got a rock star comms plan, you've got a rock star marketing plan, and now you also have rock star leaders that are bringing these other things to life. Because if you think about a potential hire that's meeting with HR, if you're talking about, the CTO who's on an industry panel, they don't just need to talk about the marketing and the communications that the comms team has. They need to be able to speak beyond that. And so I'm not saying that we're isolating or we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I'm just saying let's put a big bow around all of it so that there's some cohesion and some synergy around what it is that you all have created internally and making sure that it's translating with authority and trust and credibility when they have to open their mouths externally. And sometimes open their mouths is even what they're typing on LinkedIn. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
They're not, if they're responding to something on LinkedIn, they're not thinking about the marketing plan. They're not thinking about what the comms plan said. There was a VP of engineering at a major corporation that had just laid off thousands of people, and he typed in the comments, "That's great." I don't think he meant that's great that thousands, but see, he had the insight as the VP of engineering why they were doing what they were doing and why it was a great thing. He's not thinking about, oh gosh, there were people that were considering coming to work here and they're like, why would I want to go work for those jerks? Because their senior leaders think it's great that they just let go of thousands of people. They're not thinking the
Mhm.
marketing plant can't help with that. The comms plant can't help with that because the only thing they can do is spit out, what it is that they could have already found. So all of it works together in tandem.
So do they call you and the PR team at that moment and go, "Uh-oh, we have an
Well,
issue"?
the problem is that when you have a PR nightmare, now we're trying to fix the narrative. What I
Yeah.
want companies to do is hear shows like this and go, let's get in front of this and make sure that,
Mm,
we all, how we're all taught like to overcome objections. I teach my clients, don't create objections that you then have to overcome. There's already going to be enough natural objections that you have to overcome. So let's make sure that your leaders that have to engage with anyone externally, if it's an investor, a customer, the media, social media, let's make sure that they're actually prepared to represent your brand in the right way to begin with. So now we're not calling in the crisis prevention and the PR because we have a nightmare. Let's get ahead of it and make sure that they're well equipped so that you don't have those problems. That's the problem that I have with the industry, especially with these tech startups. They don't think that this is important until it's too late because they've been
mm.
convinced, like you said at the beginning, that all I need is a strong product and the right team, and we're off to the races. And in one era, that worked. In the era we're in now and where we're going, you're going to get left behind, and your competitors are going to take your top talent and your customers, period.
I love it. Well, you know what? The most influential person is the one that's convinced, and you could hear it through the tone of your voice, the way that you deliver your message. It's very convincing because you believe, right? And you have an understanding of what you've seen transform these companies, what you've seen, give them that little bit of an edge in the marketplace. So really, really interesting stuff. So I'm going to switch gears just a little bit because I feel like our audience always is interested. All right, she sounds good. She's an expert in this business. She really has developed this message, right? But what about your business? Have you learned about? Meaning, you got into entrepreneurship. You are, there's always these four quadrants, right? That Kiyosaki talked about, where you're an employee, trading hours for dollars, right, and getting paid. Then you become a solopreneur and you kind of own your own job per se, right? And then you create a business out of it because now you have systems and processes and individuals that are taking things off your plate. So where in that cycle, because you are so polished and so good at what you do, have you found the intricacies of solopreneurship into business? Can you share a little insight on that from your perspective in your own business?
Yeah. Well, I am highly organized and detail oriented. So those systems that they talk about you have once you become a business, I probably had as an employee just because that's the way, my brain worked. But I can't get all of the things done that I need to get done as a business owner that's managing teams and doing all of the things and trying to be visible if it weren't for replicatable systems. But the problem that I was able to recognize where my business really shot through the roof was I started solving the problem that people recognize that they have.
Mm,
And when I made that shift, and I was like, oh, I'm talking about the problem that I know that they have. And I'm not necessarily talking about the problem that they recognize they have, because what it is that I do, they may not even necessarily see how that ladders up to the problem that they recognize they have. And so when I made that shift, even once I was already in the business quadrant, when I made the shift to making sure that I was solving the problem, or I'm still solving the same problem, but speaking about the problem that I solve by talking to the problem that they recognize they have, that's when I felt like, oh, everything is really starting to gel together as a business. And I don't feel like I'm over here fighting this solopreneur fight anymore.
mm. No, that's a great description, and I think you have to do some soul searching on that, right? I would think that it took you a little bit of time. As you said, you kind of fought that, being able to market yourself, business development, approach it in a certain way, but you're also learning like, hey, I have to work with the PR, the comms, the marketing, and how do I, like you said earlier, complementary, be that person of value and kind of plug into those spaces. So interesting, interesting. So, all right, no, anything else as far as, systems and things that you've noticed, even just right now with AI's evolution over the last year and a half or two and speeding up the way that you do things. Do you have like a video series online? Do you have an educational platform that they can plug into, or is it truly these one-on-one, one-to-many scenarios?
So I have a podcast of my own that a new episode drops every Monday where I'm talking about different things that we're talking about now. I do have a YouTube channel that I haven't recorded a video for the last few weeks because I've been focused on the podcast and the Substack. But I am planning to develop even more. I don't want to call them online training, if you will, but I really want my YouTube to kind of be like an academy where they can come and they're like, okay, this is great, but like I need some stuff that I can do like right now. I don't have time to wait until you get here, or I don't have time to wait until your next 2-day thing is I can put people on a plane and send them to Dallas. And so we're starting to look more into I'm working with a company in Canada where we're probably in Q2 going to start putting more emphasis on having more like an online academy that will live
Mm.
on YouTube.
Hmm.
And it'll be free. We're not going to charge for it.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you're going to use YouTube as the mechanism and
Yeah.
platform. Okay. Because I
Because
know.
when I'm working with someone, there's so much that they just it doesn't always work well if like, oh, okay, sit down. So what if you ask your leaders like, okay, well, what's your unique point of view? And they sit there and like, I don't know. And then nobody around, you know what I mean? Like some of the work that I do is just so much more effective when either myself or someone from my team is working with them, not go listen to this, think about that. Well, what happens if you thought about it and you still don't know what the hell to say or do next? And so most of the content that I put out is the what and the why. And obviously, I give some of the how. But again, if you already have a competency gap in that area, I don't want this to be seen as just one more thing that companies think they can get away with just checking the box. Oh, I had them go watch some videos and nothing moved.
Mhm.
Because that's what y'all are doing right now. You're sticking your people in front of computers and you're checking off boxes so you can cover your ass. I'm sorry. So you can cover your own ass and say that you took your theme through all of these trainings, but nothing moves. And it's because that's just not the most effective way to really have transformation in a person's life.
It made me think of Workday, as one of the tools inside of both major corporations, right? Both the banks I just came from and I'm at. It's interesting, right? That yeah, they put you into these modules and you're kind of just getting through it because you know you have to because it's compliance and what have you. But it made me relate it to that. So I love that you have that human touch, right? And as much as AI grows and gets better and hopefully, create some ease for us, I think it still always comes back to relate to like, hey, they're going to work with Shayna directly. Look at the impact and look at the testimonials that you probably have on your podcast and on your website and all that stuff. So it's really interesting that way. So listen, how we end our podcast is typically CEO. So client experience. E is for engagement. I'm excited to hear that one because I know that you're going to bring some really unique perspective on it. And then O is operational excellence, which we touched on a little bit. So from a client experience, if you think about value proposition, dealing with your company, your brand, and what you've been able to do in the marketplace, what does that look like? If you could describe it in 60 seconds to 90 seconds of what your value proposition client experience is.
The value propositions that they get from working with me or the actual experience of working with me?
Experience and working with you, yeah.
Okay. Well, the experience that you're going to get from me is going to be no fluff, only stuff that works, just like I've demonstrated here. I'm direct, which is also probably why I get along with the tech guys because I don't want to say I don't care how you feel, but I'm less concerned about whether you like me and I'm making you feel good. I'm less concerned about that than I am you getting results. So by working with me, we're going to get straight down to business. There's not going to be any fluff. We're going to have fun while we do it. I believe that just because I take what I do seriously, I don't have to be serious while I do it. But the outcome is you're going to increase funding and you're going to gain greater market share because your people are building that trust and credibility. And you said it best when you talked about like the AI or whatever. Trust and presence and authority, none of that stuff can be replicated by technology. And so we have to make sure that as technology is taking over, that the people that represent our companies are still able to communicate like humans and that they're still able to overcome the challenges that your company is facing that technology is never going to be able to do. It's going to make things faster, it's going to make things easier, but if you don't have the right human touch, then it's going to be very difficult for you to win in the next decade.
Yeah, no, it's going to be, I think it's I was saying earlier, I spent till about almost midnight with a good buddy of mine that's in the pharmaceutical space and talking about leadership and different things in our life. And, you know, the transition of technology and how it's impacted, 40 years ago, 20 years ago, now, still comes down to human beings, right? So I love that you're in a space that really, as you said, you identified the actual problem and how they relate to the problem. So now they have a connection to it and they could see the impact that you can make. So, all right, this is engagement. So I love finding out from entrepreneurs, CEOs, founders of companies, and entrepreneurs, how do you like to engage? So it sounds like you're a no BS, no fluff person, but do you like to take people out to dinner? Are you a events person? Do you like to go to the game or what have you, or opera or whatever? So that's what the question is about. Like, how do people and what should people expect in engaging with Shayna?
I'm hilarious. But I love to be outside. Now, that's also not true. I hate going places, not because I hate being places, but because I hate putting on clothes and makeup and leaving to do all the things that you have to do to prepare. But I love in-person engagement. That's one of the reasons why I really enjoy living in the Dallas area because there's so much business stuff that is happening. There's no shortage of
Mm.
places that you can go to actually, I like to be belly to belly, heart to heart. I think that anybody can slap up a video. They're probably reading a teleprompter anyway, but you don't really know whether or not you even want to communicate with a person beyond today, let alone be in bed with them for 3 to 6 months. I mean that figuratively. Um, if you have not really been heart to heart and belly to belly. And I am a what you see is what you get kind of girl. I would like to think that most people are, being their true authentic selves. And that way we can determine like, do we want to do anything together beyond today, whether it's create a referral partnership relationship, if I want to hire you, if you want to hire me. And I just think that you can just cut to the chase. It's almost like online dating. No, I want to meet you out in person because I will be able to tell within the first 20 minutes if I ever want to see you again. I don't want to spend
Mm.
3 weeks looking at your profile and watching your videos that you've curated. And it's the same thing in business. Like, I just want to be heart to heart, belly to belly, and figure out do we want to do life together in some capacity. But I like to have
Oh,
fun. Like, I'm the jokester, I'm the, pick at people, I'm that kind of girl.
well, if you can't pick at people, you really aren't friends, right? So that's well, at least in Chicago, we're like that. The boys and the gals that you can kind of mess with and pick at them. Today's one of my best friend's birthdays, and I sent them a text message. I'm like, man, you're getting old, 53, and blah
Exactly.
blah blah, this and that, and he's like, oh man, can't wait to see you at the Super Bowl, party that we're having and stuff. So it's always part of that charisma, right, of keeping things, high level and fun. So,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
So operational excellence, and you touched on it, a couple of the mechanisms and things that you use, but is there anything that you're using technology wise or throughout the process? Like you said, you're starting to work with a Canadian company, I think you said, for training and stuff like that, but is there any other tools that you're
Yeah.
using that has helped you, win in this business?
Yeah. I first want to say that I love AI, like even like Chat GPT and things like that. I love that, but I never use it as a starting point. I never
Mm.
let it tell me how I should think or what I should be doing. I tell
Hmm.
it how it should think and what it should be doing, and I ask it to refine it. So I am not a fan of using AI to give me my own thoughts. Like, I develop the thought leadership, I develop the strategy, I'm the human. I just want you, machine, to tell me how to do this better or how to amplify it. So I use it probably second where a lot of people are using it first. But in terms of specific tools, I'm on a lot of podcasts. I've been interviewed over 500 different times, and that can
Mm.
be very laborious. So I use an online platform that pitches for me. Again, I'm telling it what to say and shaping like what the messages should be and who they should be contacting. I'm not leaving it up to them to like represent me in the way that they want to be represented. And so that saves a lot of time. So that is one of the tools that I use. And I set up some custom GPTs for things like in my own podcast that help me to write the show notes and, what is my thumbnail text going to be? Some of the things that used to take me hours, I've
Hmm.
created some custom GPTs that has allowed me to replace people and has allowed me to be able to replace even some of the tools that I had a subscription to, because there's something about those $29 a month and $7 a month, and it just does something to me. You would think that they took $1 million out of my bank account if one subscription takes out seven. It just is like nails on a chalkboard for me. So I set up some custom GPTs to be able to replace some of the tools and people that I were using for some of the things that we repeat every week.
I love it. I love it. So do you have any virtual assistants or anybody that you kind of have as, managing the calendar or anything else that takes off your plate as well?
I don't let anybody do my own don't do my emails. Like if there
Okay.
was like a customer service email or something like that, I would let somebody
Mhm.
handle that. But I handle my own emails. And if you ever get a DM from me, it's me.
Mhm.
So I have VAs that do things like run my CRM, the things that are just not the highest and best use of my time. And a lot of people would argue with that. A lot of people would say, oh, she's really not in the business quadrant like she said she was. But I believe in human engagement. And if there is going to be a person, if someone is going to be being reached out to, or they're reaching out and they think they're talking to me, I want them to be talking,
Sure.
talking and
Yeah.
talking to me. And that's just something that I won't release regardless. And I never have a desire to have a big team. Like I like having the systems and the tools and like you do this and you're a contractor and you do this and you're a contractor and you're my VA that kind of manages some of the things that just aren't the best use of my time. But I'm the person that's reaching out to you to ask you if you want to send your leaders to me. Or if you reach out and you're like, hey, I wonder about X, Y, and Z. It's not somebody that is, again, read the comms and the marketing and is responding based on how they think. Like it's really me talking, and I want to keep that.
Nice. Nice. My brain sometimes goes into different place when we're doing these, and I go, Jay-Z, I'm a businessman.
I'm a
Right?
businessman.
So it's awesome. I love it. I love it. Well, hey, thank you so much for coming on the Go4CEO channel. Tell everybody about how to get a hold of you. What is that best, way to
Yeah.
contact you? Is it DM on LinkedIn? Is it email directly to you? Is it the website and you have a fill-in subscription or, fill out
Absolutely.
mode? So what,
So
tell them to
two
get.
things. One, follow me on LinkedIn. I'm Shayna Rattler Davis there. So follow me on LinkedIn. I produce a lot of content there. I also I post my podcast interviews and et cetera there as well. You can DM me, like if something came up today and you're like, I have a question about this. I'm the type of person that if you just have a direct question to ask me, I'm just going to answer the question, probably even give
Mhm.
you a voice note. I'm not going to say send your leaders to the 2 day thing. Now, if I think that that's what you need, I'll say let's have a conversation. Or if you think you want to have a conversation about how this could look, just DM me. But then I also I have I don't want to call it a free report, but I have you can go to externalinfluence.us and you can get an insights paper that goes even deeper in what it is that we were talking about today.
No, yeah, and there's always obviously marketing in the back end, and how do you create some sort of lead mechanism and magnet, those types of things. So, really awesome stuff. So, super excited to have had you on. Anything else that you want to share, just from a high level, thought leadership standpoint, as a final message?
Yeah, I would just say put just as much emphasis on training your leaders to influence well externally as you are developing them to influence well internally. And don't wait until it's too late. Start to figure out how you can take steps towards that now.
Heed that advice, Go for CEO community. And if you love this episode, not only subscribe to the channel, but DM, call, message Shayna and become a part of the community that we've built over the last 4 or 5 years. And by the way, check out the book, The 4A Formula, Untangle Any Challenge and Think Like a CEO. It's great people like Shayna that I've had on the podcast, my own experiences of owning businesses and exiting and becoming a commercial banker, and all those types of things. So thank you so much for coming on the Go for CEO channel, Shayna.
Thank you for having me.